Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Illinois Arts Council Agency, and by the supportive viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Illinois Stories. I'm Mark McDonald in Jacksonville at the Congregational Church, which in the last couple of years has undergone huge changes. This is a very historic building and a historic congregation, and you're going to learn during this program why it is so historic, but you're also going to learn why it's undergoing changes and why now it's not only a congregation, a place where the congregation meets, it's also a performance venue. And as you can see, they're glad to see us here today. And in fact, some of the folks who work here found the old sign, the original sign, down in the basement. They had it restored. Some of the glass was broken, and now the old sign is back in front of the old church. But Mary Hathaway, this old church is no longer going to be just a church anymore. It's now going to be a performance venue, Jacksonville's latest performance venue. But you, as a member of the congregation and as a person that has studied the history of this church, you're all for that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What happened that it had to change over hands?
It was just this huge, beautiful, beautiful building. Costs a great deal of money.
Oh yeah.
I don't remember the heating bill for 1 month, but Scotty can tell you. Yeah. And so we were diminished in size, and so we said we couldn't afford any more its upkeep, so we would have to sell the building. And Scotty agreed to buy it with the understanding that our congregation could remain part of the church, that it was still our church, although it wasn't our building, because the church is the people, not the building.
Right, sure.
And so we go back to 1833, when a group of people from the Congregational Church, who were Congregationalists but had joined the Presbyterian Church, and 32 members met on December 15th, 1833, to form a new church. We called a young man, Mr. Carter, to be our first pastor. He had not yet been ordained, so Dr. Sturdivant, the second president of Illinois College and the first professor, interviewed all those people wanting to be members. And the only thing they asked was that they lead a Christian life, that they follow the Christian dictates. And so that's what we've been trying to do all these years.
This church was then built later then?
Yes.
This dates back to when?
This is second home. It was built in 1858. And really, it resembles a building on the Illinois College campus, because Dr. Sturdivant was both chairman of this building committee as well as Illinois Colleges.
I see. As we go through the program, we're going to find out why this building and this congregation was important in the founding of the Republican Party. And we're also going to go inside and find out how beautiful it is now that it's a performance space. Mary, thank you.
Thank you.
Jethro DeWolf, we are standing in the newest performance venue in Jacksonville. Was the Congregational Church a wonderful historic monument to abolitionism? But now it's a performance space because Jethro DeWolf came to town and thought the community needed this. It's a pretty remarkable story.
Yes, it is a remarkable story. Yes. The church approached me because they were dwindling in their membership, and the membership was quite elderly, and they decided that they needed to sell it. They had a mortgage on it, and asked me to pay off the mortgage so I could have the church, and then they could still have church services here, which they do. And you'll see later when we go downstairs, they've got all the lunch bags lined up for the folks that are needy, that need lunches on Saturdays and Sundays.
So you're still able to provide that for folks,
We still do that, and I and other church members, we support that financially to make sure that there's a gap covered, because Monday through Friday the Salvation Army takes care of the less fortunate. And we pick up the slack on Saturdays and Sundays, which is a wonderful tradition, and I didn't want to interrupt that.
How did you come up with the idea to make this a performance space? Now, it's a great idea because it looks perfect, but where did that idea come from?
Well, the idea came from the folks told me there used to be a theater guild, and they had state-owned property that they used, but it fell into disrepair with budget cuts and all. The building was just not usable anymore, and all that dried up. And I decided that they needed another venue like this. And but that was not my original idea when I bought the church. I originally needed a place to put my theater organ that I had brought here from Lexington, California. Lexington, South Carolina, to my home, and then that's how I actually came to here. Is I was on my way back bringing that organ to California, and I got as far as Kansas and Texas, and I looked at an ad, and it was an ad for a mansion that would in San Francisco sell for $30 million as a fixer-upper, and it was less than $200,000
In Jacksonville.
in Jacksonville.
Okay,
so that compelled me to.
There's your detour to
That
Jacksonville,
was my
right?
detour to Jacksonville, and I just had my crew. I was in a big truck carrying this organ with all the 16 speakers. We're on our way back, and I told these young people, this big guy and his girlfriend, I said, take me to the Dallas airport. I want to take the nearest red eye out. I said, so I can go chase down that house. And they said, aren't you a little past it to be gallivanting around at your age and all by yourself on red eyes and everything? And I said, this is what keeps me going. And I said, I never lost my desire for the hunt. And so I said, here's your money. You get this organ back to California, and I'm going to go see this house. And I arrived in Jacksonville on a early 3 or 4 in the morning on Sunday. I got a couple hours sleep, saw the realtor. On Monday morning, I put that house in escrow, and the rest is history.
Wow, okay.
And I completely moved from
In
California.
a later program, we're
Yes.
going to see that house because it's now being restored.
Yes.
But let's stick to the church for
Okay,
right now because,
yes.
okay, so then you buy property in Jacksonville.
Right.
And let's walk up here and take
Yeah,
a look.
I wasn't
as we
expecting
said.
to buy the church.
Because-
The church approached me.
Yeah, so you buy this big mansion
Yes.
in Jacksonville, and then you become aware of the church.
Yes, well, the people came to me and said, we are either going to, lose the church or we're going to have to sell it to real estate developers, but we heard you want to do a music school for kids and that you're going to be doing some good for the community. We'd rather give it away to you than anyone. And they approached me that way, and when they made me literally an offer I could not refuse. And I bought the building, and then at the time it had carpeted pews, and it had old 1970s or something red shag carpet.
Yeah, I remember
which was deadened the acoustics. And what's nice about this room, if you listen, it's
beautiful.
You've got a wonderful acoustic in here. And we had Ken Bradbury plays where the people in the last row that are hard of hearing like me could hear every line without a microphone. So this makes it Goldilocks acoustics.
So you have had performances in here.
Yes,
You've had music and theater.
We had sellout of Ken Bradbury plays that Mary Jane Million, who's the head of the Ken Bradbury Foundation, had put on, and she came to me, and I said, yes, I want a place to be put on here, and she tried it, and she said it was a wonderful venue for plays.
Great. And this is the organ that we were talking about.
Yes.
That you were moving across the country.
Yes.
And in the middle of moving this across the country, you hear about Jacksonville.
Yes.
And then guess where the organ ends up?
Yes. It wound up in my California home, not knowing at the time that I was coming here.
Oh, man.
And then I had to move it all the way back. So this organ has been from Lexington, South Carolina, to California, all the way back to Jacksonville.
Now, during this program, we're going to get a chance to hear this organ because you do some organ playing yourself, don't you?
Yes.
There also was an organ here that was here for the services.
Yes.
That's still here.
Yes.
And there's an organ back there, a Hammond
basement,
organ
yes,
in the
yes,
basement.
yes.
So we'll get a bunch of organ in this
You
program.
get the idea that I might be an organ nut?
I'm getting the feeling that you are.
I got it be real bad.
This is the one though that we really
Yes.
want to hear.
Yes.
And we will. But there's more to this story than
Yes.
this performance space and the organs. There's the history of this building, and we have a historian here who spent 5 or 6 years doing research,
Yes.
and found out that one of the members of this congregation was a very, very important historical figure in the Republican Party.
Yes.
So we'll hear about that. We're going to also listen to you play a little bit of organ, and we're going to learn more about what the rest of this building is going to be transformed into, because you're talking about a museum here, aren't you?
Yes, on the 3rd floor. It's going to be known as the Underground Railroad and Abolitionist History Museum, because this building is literally the cradle of the abolitionist movement and the Republican Party and the Underground Railroad, of which the gentleman you're going to refer to later, Elihu Wolcott, was the chief conductor of the Underground Railroad here. An absolutely fascinating history.
Terrific. Jethro, that looks like a blast.
It is.
Is that as much fun as it looks like?
This is fun. This is an organ that's digital. Everything you heard sounds like a real pipe organ. Organ nuts will say that must be a pipe organ, but it's not. It was made by the Allen Organ Company of Macungie, Pennsylvania, and their specialty is custom instruments like this. And this one happens to be a duplication, literally, of the St. Louis Fox Wurlitzer. There were only 4 of these type made, one for the San Francisco Fox, the New York Paramount, the Atlanta Fox, and the Detroit Fox, pardon me, and one other one. Anyway, there were 4 Jesse Crawford specials of 4 manuals and this many stops.
Wow.
So anyway, it's a fabulous instrument.
You could spend a lifetime learning on what all of these things do.
Yes. No,
Have you had lessons?
No, I never had a lesson because I was dyslexic as a child, and they told me I was unteachable for reading music.
Oh, boy.
So I figured my own weird way of doing it with taking photographic snapshots of the music and considering them single events, only different than the others.
Wow, you figured it out.
Yeah, I did. I did because I love music so much, and I always wanted to play the organ.
And I think we've said this, but this is an interesting story because it's this organ. It was you traveling to get this organ that actually ended up with you being in Jacksonville. So here's the organ, and here you go.
I wouldn't be sitting here today. I'd be in somewhere else. I'd be back in my California ranch, which I still have, but I'll never move back there. I came to Jacksonville and fell in love with it.
Oh, man.
And I just love it here. And this organ, as I say, I was bringing it across from, it was a bucket list item number 4 to get a nice theater organ, and I did very well. This was from an estate sale sort of thing where I got it at a great price. Knew an instrument like this would be over $200,000, well over, and the equivalent of its new one, and it's nearly new.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very pleased to have it.
These pipes are not, these are not the real pipes.
No,
this is not
those,
a pipe organ.
Those are what they call facade pipes, and behind them you can see real pipes to the classical 1956 Moeller classical pipe organ that we're going to hear later too.
All right.
So
and then what you have, if you look over there, you see some of the speakers.
Right. There's 4 speakers here, 4 speakers here, and there's 6 all across the top.
Oh,
and those who are organ nuts will understand when I tell them that 2 of those speakers and 4 of these on each side. One represents the main division, the other the solo division, and the percussion sounds your all your chimes and things like. And all your other things that make drum sounds and everything all come from 2 speakers in the middle. So
it's still a lot to haul around, isn't it?
Yes.
It's not like hauling around all the drums and all the everything that it takes, cymbals and everything it takes to make all the sounds. It's still a lot to carry
It took
around.
a whole moving van to move it here. Yeah, and then I took it all the way to California, and then after I bought this house you're going to see later, then I said, well, I guess I got to move it all the way back here, which I did. And I'm glad we did. As a matter of fact, we're going to be having screening of silent films here, as well as other film festivals. And Mark Gifford is going to play the organ for the famous silent Halloween classic called Phantom of the Opera.
Oh, good. Good.
And he's going to do that just before this Halloween for the family. We're going to call it a family Halloween spooktacular.
Okay.
And Mark's going to play the organ for that. And then I'm going to do a thing where I emulate a werewolf and dim the lights to candlelight and spook the kids out with some very spooky music.
Oh, that's going to those kids. Oh, those kids are
Halloween,
going to be spooked. I'm spooked. This is the organ that was here in the church.
Yes, when I bought it.
And this is a true pipe organ,
This is a true pipe organ built by the M.P. Moeller Company of Hagerstown, Maryland. And they were at the time, this was built the largest producer of pipe organs in America. And Virgil Fox, the famous organist, did a lot of their dedication recitals because he liked their organs. And it's a wonderful instrument.
Yeah, you're very lucky to have it. It's not a theater organ, but it has a different function, doesn't it?
It's a totally different function. It's for accompaniment of a church service, and this is also very versatile for classic pieces like Bach and the French literature. For a 2-manual instrument, it's extremely well disposed.
Now, you have plans for this building in addition to this performance space.
Yes.
And I know the third floor is going to be a museum. And would you walk us through that?
Yes, that is going to be, as you know, as your program stated, that this is a very historically significant building to the abolitionist movement and the formation of the Republican Party and so forth. And because of that, I decided I'm going to give over the third floor for free, just $1 a year, to members of the Underground Railroad. And Art Wilson, who is the expert on the Underground Railroad, will be conducting lectures and then tours of people where they can go around and actually see the homes that were part of the Underground Railroad right here in Jacksonville. So
take us up there, and we'll take a real quick look.
We'll take a quick look, and that's just starting. They just began to do it, and they're getting grants and getting money together to get that together, and that'll be part of shining a national spotlight on this building for what its true history is about.
Ben Belzer, you do historic work for the Illinois Supreme Court.
Correct.
And you also have prepared a speech at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library, and that speech is particularly about this subject and about this particular church in Jacksonville,
Right.
Which, as it turns out, has a national importance, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. So the guy who founded it was one of the laymen, Elihu Wolcott, and he had broken off from the local Presbyterian church, and that's very key to everything that we're going to talk here, because it created a division, a schism, and he brought people from that Presbyterian church into his congregational church, and that broke a plan of union. And eventually down the road, that would lead to, in 1852, the plan of union ending, and that's significant, and I'll show some pictures here. So they had an Illinois Association of Congregational Churches, and Illinois is the only state that had a defiant anti-slavery movement within their congregationalism. Out of all the other states, Illinois was the only one. And Elihu Wolcott was the moderator of, during this, of the association. He was the moderator who said, we are going to be anti-slavery, we won't allow slaveholders in the pulpit, we won't allow them to take communion. And that was a really big deal because it was so bold. And then, let me get this one. This is a synopsis I wrote. So Frank J. Heinel, who used to live in Jacksonville, wrote about Elihu Wolcott and the church in the 1930s. And he wrote about it because the Dean of Divinity at Yale, which Elihu had gone to, came to Jacksonville in 1933 for the 100-year anniversary.
1833.
1833 is when the church was founded. 1933 is when the dean came.
Oh, okay.
At the 100-year anniversary.
Got you.
And he stated that this church has national significance, and that what Elihu Wolcott did when he broke from the Presbyterian church, it led to the nationalization of congregationalism. And Luther Wiggle was the dean's name, and he stated that the organization and life of this church in Jacksonville are of unmistakable significance in American history, and it deserves national attention, which we're doing today. But that was in 1852 when it ended. This guy is Mr. Beauvais, and the reason I mention him, so after 1852 happened, there was a conference in Albany, New York. All Congregationalists said, we are anti-slavery, we're ending the plan of union. And this guy, Mr. Beauvais, from Ripon, Wisconsin, where the Republican Party was formed, he stated first in this church, the Congregational Church in Ripon, Wisconsin, he said, we need a new party and it's going to be called Republican. But the significance of that is that it's at a congregational church, happened right after the plan of union ended, and they said, we want an anti-slavery party. And remember, that started with Wolcott when he created the schism. He said, we're anti-slavery, and the dean pointed out that Wolcott did that was nationally significant. And the reason I mention Beauvais again, Beauvais wrote a book. He wrote in a book, and he said, very interestingly, that in 1854 in the New York Tribune, he wrote to Horace Greeley, and Horace Greeley was the editor of the New York Tribune. In 1854 in June, Kansas-Nebraska Act had just happened. Horace Greeley put in the paper that day, we need a new party called Republican. And Beauvais wrote that same day, someone from Jacksonville, Illinois, was attached in the article in the New York Tribune saying we want an anti-slavery party. That was only signed as Old 76. So this was from the New York Tribune. This is Greeley saying we need a Republican Party. This is the person or persons from Jacksonville saying anti-slavery is what the party must be. June 12, 1854.
Yeah.
It was signed Old 76. So I have my suspicions about who Old 76 was. So Elihu Wolcott was the chair of the first ever club that espoused the principles of the Republican Party. He was in that club with 7 other men here in Jacksonville, 1853, the year before this article came out. And Elihu, I think him or else these guys got together and they wrote that together to the editor, or else Elihu solely did it, because Elihu, it was signed Old 76. Elihu's ancestor, Oliver Wolcott, was a signer of the Declaration of Independence, 1776. But the reason why that's significant is because the person who came out of Jacksonville was Paul Selby. Paul Selby was married to a Congregationalist, a member of this church. Her name was Era Post. She died in 1865 and he remarried a Hitchcock woman. But before that, when he was married to Era, she was a Congregationalist, and his affiliates, this was the Abolition Church, encouraged, and he eventually called for the editors' convention, which brought about Lincoln. So this guy was here in Jacksonville. People think of Selby as being Springfieldian or Chicagoan. He was a Jacksonvilleite before that, after coming from Ohio. But he was the editor of the Morgan Journal here in Jacksonville. And I think those guys got together and had him send Horace Greeley that piece I showed you. And I'm also going to mention why I think Elihu's overlooked. So Elihu was the local chief Underground Railroad conductor. He also ran against Lincoln for Congress in 1846. And you can barely see this, but this is Peter Cartwright, Lincoln, and Wolcott. So that's the ballot. And so a lot of people, when they think of that as the year Lincoln ran against Cartwright. They overlook Wolcott. They also overlook him because when Elijah Lovejoy was murdered by a mob, Elihu Wolcott was president of the Illinois Anti-Slavery Society, the first. But since Lovejoy was murdered by a mob, Wolcott's overlooked. So he's always overlooked. So
because there's some big event going on.
There's
right?
something bigger happens. But this site is nationally significant because, in my opinion, after all this studying, it led to the Republican Party, the anti-slavery party. And so this deserves national attention.
Jethro, we're looking at some of the starting material. Some of this has already been collected by some of the folks on the Underground Railroad Committee. And this will be sort of the start of the museum and some of the items that have already been used.
Yes, there'll be a significant archive here donated by Art Wilson and Ruth Lanier, who are going to run the museum. And they're going to give lectures and take people out to show the various Underground Railroad spots. And it's wonderful. They preserved history that otherwise would surely have perished.
This used to be, I guess this was Sunday school. These rooms were all for Sunday school.
Classrooms at one time.
And these will be rooms that you can use for various factors.
A
timeline,
You walk through the history starting in the first room will be where the slaves first were picked up in Africa and places, and then where they brought to this country, and they'll show the chains and the leg irons and everything. It'll be a most fascinating history. And I've literally given it to them for $1 a year so that they can promote this history. And have school children come here and learn about it.
So when we see on the sign outside that says Lovejoy Hall, we also see that you have this Underground Railroad Museum. Plus, there's on the second floor, you have it listed as an Academy for the Arts.
It's Esprit de Corps Academy, yes. And that's for kids of all ages, and it might even be some adult programs where we can replace culture curriculum items in the schools that have been cut because of budget cuts. And we need to promote culture and arts among the community, especially the poorer kids who don't have access to this.
And you or someone from this academy would go out to those schools.
Yes, we
and
do the satellite system. We're going to go out to the various schools like Beardstown, which has a lot of poverty there and meatpacking houses and things. And we're going to take the school to them so that they don't have to come here and take their valuable time and spend money to come here. And then when it comes time for an event, we've got the stage venue, we've got practice stage venue, a smaller one in the basement. So we've got all they need to supplant the cultural curriculum that just isn't in the schools anymore. And it's my pleasure to be able to do that.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
As you can see, the Congregational Church in Jacksonville here has already undergone a huge transformation. And Jethro has also bought other historic properties in Jacksonville, and we're going to get a tour of those in a later program. With another Illinois Story in Jacksonville, I'm Mark McDonald. Thanks for watching.
Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Illinois Arts Council Agency, and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you.